Feeling depressed, despondent, fed up, overwhelmed by anxiety and a sense of existential dread that you just can't seem to shake? Does the relentless pounding of thoughts in your head, day and night and day, make it impossible for you to enjoy the little things? Antidepressants, anti-anxiety, stank, crank, smack, crack, uppers, downers, and autoerotic asphyxiation. Nothing seems to help. Maybe you should ask your local curandera about Fuck It All from April Pharmaceuticals. Independent studies show that Fuck It All's unique properties deaden the brain's ability to give a rat's hairy rectum about the news, politics, your mortgage payment, Thanksgiving with your racist uncle, police brutality, that mole that just keeps getting bigger, internet trolls, and much, much more. So if you're ready to taste the sunshine, to hear Jell-O, to experience big eyebrow energy, to just be yourself again.
Side effects may include corpse gardener's elbow, cheesy dong, ingrown doorknob, restless navel syndrome, Beavis and butt cheeks, Gilligan's bile, clown shoes, old man's earlobes, frosted nips, nostril corporate takeover, or kidney scones.
When you can't take it anymore, take this. Fuck It All. Recorded in Round Rock, Texas, in front of a live teleconferenced audience, it's the What's Update with Xander Quation.
Season 2 Election Boogaloo.
Hey, welcome to the What's Update. I'm Xander Quation. Let's get started. If the theaters open next May, as planned, it will have been 444 days since the lights went dark on Broadway. The shutdown is part of an effort by the city of New York to slow the spread of the coronavirus. Or, hear me out here, is it GB's payback to the monsters that created Cats the movie? I say, the only way our world can possibly restore equilibrium is for Universal Pictures to finally unleash the fabled butthole cut. What a catastrophe. You get it?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
No.
Moving on, Seagram's heiress Claire Bronfman was sentenced to 81 months in prison for her role in funding and intimidating the victims of the NXIVM sex cult. NXIVM, which presented itself as a self-help organization, became famous, or infamous, after its founder, Keith Rainier, was convicted of racketeering, sex trafficking, and fraud, among other crimes. According to court testimony, women were ritually branded near their pelvis with Rainier's initials. Alright, now, I'm no marketing major, but I'm pretty sure that's not what brand loyalty means.
Oh.
In other news of rich people being garbage humans, a New York Times expose shows President Trump, while paying nearly nothing in taxes, sure spent an awful lot on his hair. For several years of his run on The Apprentice, he spent $70,000 on hairstyling, which his production company then deducted from his taxes. Tax experts have said that deducting a personal expense like that is, in all likelihood, illegal. And even if it isn't, that sad rat's nest of a dead varmint that lives on his rotten pumpkin head definitely should be. In technology news, John McAfee, the former software engineer behind the McAfee antivirus program, has been arrested in Spain on charges of tax evasion. McAfee had previously been a key suspect in the murder investigation of his neighbor at his home in Belize, but subsequently fled the country. It appears that McAfee couldn't extend his protection plan, so he ended up opting out and accepting the risk. But, okay, real talk. Seriously, McAfee, quit spamming me with renewal requests. I'm done. Anyway, a 16-month investigation by the House Judiciary Committee found that Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google had abused their power and influence. Lawmakers noted that these tech giants were creating monopolies not seen since, quote, the era of oil barons and railroad tycoons. Not a great comparison to have attached to your company. To make the report more accessible to the public, the committee's Democratic leadership also released the 449-page report as a 700-part Twitter feed, a 1,300-part TikTok, and one Facebook post that is only slightly longer than your amosexual uncle's last treatise on the Second Amendment. While on the subject, beginning October 20th, Twitter will temporarily turn off certain features and slow others in order to combat election misinformation. Users will be given a timeout before they can hit the button to retweet a post from another account. A notice will also warn users that they are about to share inaccurate information if they attempt to share content that Twitter has flagged as false. Twitter will add a label to any claims as to who won the election until it has been called by the proper election authorities. But, if they slow down Twitter, how will Trump ever find the time to call into 6 Fox News shows a day? It's a mystery. The 2020 Nobel Prizes have been announced in Oslo and Stockholm. Winners include former American poet laureate Louise Glück for literature, and the Peace Prize was awarded to the World Food Program for its efforts to combat a surge in global hunger amid the coronavirus pandemic. Additionally, the No Balls Prize goes to Senator Lindsey Elizabeth Graham of South Carolina for refusing to get COVID tested in order to duck out of debating his opponent, Jamie Harrison. Harrison, with a $30 million war chest, is out fundraising Miss Lindsey to the point that Graham keeps shamelessly begging for money on Fox News.
What a whore.
Exactly. According to a 2-year inquiry by the Justice Department's Inspector General, Trump's former Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, insisted on separating migrant children from their parents. Yeah, remember that? Kids in cages? That was Sessions' idea. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein also rebuked government lawyers for refusing to prosecute 2 cases because the children were barely more than infants. I mean, I kind of get why Sessions hates children. They terrify him, especially after they ate all of his friends and forced him to leave the tree. The coronavirus outbreak connected to the White House Rose Garden ceremony, where Trump announced the nomination of Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, is responsible for at least 30 known cases so far. That is more than the recent average daily number of new cases for all of Australia. And, much like colonial Australia, the White House
is entirely peopled with criminals.
Barrett, seen here... No, that's Natasha Richardson. No, that's Elizabeth Moss. Okay, here we go. Barrett appeared in a 2010 People of Praise directory with the title of Handmaid. People of Praise was established in 1971 to, quote, have a more intense Christian community. Barrett has frequently commented that she believes her role as a judge is to use her position in power to, quote, build the kingdom of God. On the subject of Barrett's nomination to the High Court, God was quoted as saying,
Already got one. It's very nice.
the hot zone of infection at the White House has caused several top U.S. military officials to have to quarantine after a COVID-19 exposure, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Army Chief of Staff, the Naval Operations Chief, the Air Force Chief of Staff, the Cybercom Commander, the Space Force Operations Chief, the Chief of the National Guard, and the Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps. China and Russia combined have never devastated U.S. military leadership as much as old Typhoid Gary in the Oval Office. He's the kind of idiot who holds the grenade and throws the pin. Remember when Trump called deceased U.S. military veterans suckers, or when he called U.S. POWs losers? Simpler times. Now, Trump says he caught COVID from Gold Star families at a White House event on September 27th. You know, the families of those suckers who died in military service. Alright, what's next? Blaming 9/11 first responders for giving him malaria? Actually, speaking of malaria, has anyone heard anything from the First Lady recently? Or is her infected ass still off somewhere bitching about Christmas? Adding to the growing number of White House officials infected, senior Trump advisor Stephen Miller has tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, this is an interesting discovery, since bat-to-human and human-to-human transmission is well known, but scientists remain perplexed by this first case of COVID transmitted from a moldy pumpkin to a malignant ghoul. Happy Spooktober, everybody. Before his vice presidential debate with Kamala Harris, racist Bannon, Mike Pence, seen here demonstrating how he separates his dirty laundry, objected to having a plexiglass barrier on the stage, despite the Trump-Pence White House becoming a petri dish of COVID-19. After all, Mikey Milquetoast already asked Mother for permission to be in the room with another woman. Then, his staff informed him that Harris is part black and part Indian, so then he requested that there be two barriers. In a backlash against a virus crackdown on gatherings in New York, local Orthodox and Hasidic Jewish lawmakers are saying Governor Andrew Cuomo has chosen to pursue a scientifically and constitutionally questionable shutdown of our communities. Yo, Shmagegi, if nutmix like you would just learn to wear a mask, maybe we could open up all our communities. I mean, what's next? Come for a sleepover and leave with free bedbugs. Besides, you're already cosplaying as a 15th century German. Why not add a mask? Afraid it'll get tangled in your paya? We Jews survived the Spanish Inquisition and the Holocaust. I'm pretty sure you can get through trapped at home with the fam. 13 men were arrested on terrorism, conspiracy, and weapons charges after the FBI foiled a plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan and start a civil war. The men, pictured here looking embarrassed after showing up to the fascist picture day wearing the same beard as the rest of the class, met in a basement under a trap door in a shop to discuss the abduction of the governor before the November election and the possible bombing of a bridge to act as a distraction. Alright, I'm level with you. Fellas, you're already hanging around in a basement with your neckbeard friends. Instead of plotting kidnapping and sedition, maybe try a nice board game like Risk. Or, if you gotta be a bunch of basement bastard beard bros hating on aliens, why not try Warhammer 40k? It's perfect! 2020 has been an endless cesspool of bad news. We work hard to at least give you a spoonful of funny to help the horror go down. But some things are just so frickin' nerd-tastic that we don't even need a joke. Welcome to Nerd Squee! Now, what's more nerd-tastic than Dungeons & Dragons, I hear you ask? Celebrity live plays in theaters? Been there, done that. Livestream D&D on Twitch and YouTube? Ah, come on, that's old news. Here is the new sexy, fellow nerds. How about a D&D game where all of the players are Native American comedians, writers, and actors? We'll be watching animation writer and professional Dungeons & Dragons player Kelly Lynn D'Angelo and her friends for Native American D&D, which starts Monday, October 12th, which also happens to be Indigenous Peoples Day. Screw you, Columbus! Fireball! Stick around, we'll be right back. Welcome back. On the subject of women, Mahatma Gandhi once wrote, "To call woman the weaker sex is a libel. It is man's injustice to woman. If by strength is meant brute strength, then indeed is woman less brute than man. If by strength is meant moral power, then woman is immeasurably man's superior." He added, "Without her, man could not be. If nonviolence is the law of our being, the future is with woman." So, here's the thing. I love women. Seriously, some of my most favorite people on the planet are women. My mom is a woman, my bubby is a woman, my rabbi is a woman, most of my favorite teachers have been women. I prefer women doctors. The director, the editor, and the other executive producer of this show are, you guessed it, women. I think it's fair to say that I am a vocal and proud feminist. Now, I can hear some of you out there complain. "But Xander, feminists are angry man-hating, unfeminine lesbians that want to kill babies, burn bras, and abolish marriage and families. Feminists want to subjugate men. Feminists hate sex. We don't need feminism anymore because chicks are now totally equal, dude." First of all, hypothetical person talking to me, you're a garbage human. Fix that. Second, none of those assumptions are even remotely true. Feminism is more necessary now than it has ever been. This year is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution that gave women in the United States the right to vote. While franchise is a societal equalizer, women in the United States and around the world are still struggling with basic rights that are easily afforded to men. Feminism is about ensuring equality. It's an ongoing effort to level the playing field between men and women. It's about making sure that all women, biological, trans, gay, straight, black, brown, white, young, and old, are given equal access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. While huge strides have been made in achieving some gender equality, a great deal of work still must be done, both in the US and abroad. Issues like the gender pay gap, access to reproductive health care, protection against sexual assault and violence, and gender representation in media are among the many issues facing women in the developed world. Women in developing nations have it far worse. Addressing the gender pay gap in countries where women are suffering from horrific practices like honor killings, sexual trafficking, child marriages, and genital mutilation seems a bit tone deaf. And while things have improved a great deal for American women over the last century, their rights are more in peril now than they have been in a very long time. In 4 short years, the Trump administration has already systematically stripped protections for women by issuing an order from the Department of Health and Human Services redefining life as beginning at conception, expanding the rights of employers to deny women insurance coverage for contraception, passing a bill in the House of Representatives that would ban abortions after 20 weeks, cutting international funding for women's rights and reproductive health, blocking laws that promote equal pay in the workplace, requiring the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to omit specific words including fetus, evidence-based, transgender, and diversity from the agency's budget, and revoking federal guidelines specifying that transgender students have the right to use public school restrooms that match their gender identity. This is just a short list of actions taken by the current administration to roll back hard-won rights for women in America and beyond. And then there's the U.S. Supreme Court. The death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is even more tragic, because she was one of the court's greatest advocates for women's issues. Trump's nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, has an established record of opposition to female bodily autonomy by looking to further restrict reproductive rights, opposition to employer-funded contraception coverage, opposition to Title IX protections, and more. Her confirmation will shift the needle of the court to the far right for decades to come. But what gives me, a young, single, straight white male, the right to zansplain women's issues to you? Good question. At a 2013 press conference for the Sound of Change live concert, musician and self-avowed feminist John Legend said, "All men should be feminists. If men care about women's rights, the world will be a better place. We are better off when women are empowered. It leads to a better society." A little more than half the people on the planet are women. The odds are pretty good that everyone at least has one woman in their life that means something to them. One woman that they respect and honor above all others. One woman that cares for them. One woman that makes them feel safe and loved. One woman who makes life on earth a little brighter every day she's in it. One woman that is there for you when you need her. Don't we owe it to that woman to do better by the other 3.9 billion? We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our guest is a pioneering trailblazer and a feminist powerhouse. We'll start with standard questions. Who, you, what's due, and why?
I'm Trina Robbins. I'm a writer and HERstorian, and I write because I can't not write because I love it more than anything in the world. And I'm HERstorian because if you're not written about, you're forgotten. And I don't want all these women I write about to be forgotten.
Oh, it's very noble. All right, so in an interview you did for Comic Book Artist in October of 2000, you were discussing the problems with the comic book industry in that at that point it really only catered to 14 to 19-year-old boys. You've witnessed many trends over the years, so in what ways do you think things have gotten better in the industry and what things have gotten worse?
Nothing really has gotten worse, except, of course, the pandemic has caused a lot of comic stores to close and has caused a lot of the two major comics publishers to kind of clean house and cancel a lot and get, fire, unfortunately, a lot. But I hope that a lot of that will come back after the pandemic. And when it's easier to have a comic book store and to shop in a comic book store. As for getting better, everything has gotten better. There are so many more women than ever before creating comics these days. And they no longer have to be guys with big chins and fists punching each other out. They're real stories, they're graphic novels. Publishers, besides the big two, real book publishers are publishing graphic novels. And the new creators, the new comic creators are wonderful because they no longer have to draw in the house style. It used to be that if you didn't draw in the Marvel or DC style and couldn't draw this kind of angular, tough stuff with the fists, like I say, then you couldn't find work in comics. And now comics are open to every style. And these new people are so talented, men and women. Not all guys want to draw guys punching each other out either.
Yeah, very true. So in that same interview, you also spoke about problems with distribution. You mentioned like you have the big two these days, or you have the big two, but then nowadays you have a lot more different distributors. Then also you have digital distribution as an available option. So do you feel that the industry has made a lot of progress in making more types of stories available for all readers?
Enormous progress. And speaking of distribution, part of the reason why, if you didn't do superheroes punching each other out, you couldn't, the comic book stores wouldn't carry you. I mean, the comic book stores were all superhero fans, grown-up superhero fans, selling to younger superhero fans. And they didn't want anything that wasn't guys punching each other out. So, and if they didn't carry your comic, of course, nobody's going to find your comic and it's not going to sell. So really, comic book stores killed a lot of projects, a lot of really, really good comics. They killed them. They murdered them. But it's not like that anymore. The comic book stores are now, there's lots of women running comic book stores, lots of guys who are interested in more than superheroes. The comic book stores are open and you can find, when they're open. Unfortunately, I have to, there is the pandemic, but they're open to so many more styles. You can find really, really good graphic novels these days, really good stories and good art. And in comic book stores, it's not like they used to be.
Yeah, I have noticed that in my local comic shop, I go to one called Rogues Gallery. Over the years, I've noticed that a lot more like independent comics have come in, or comics based off of like web comics, especially, have now made their way into the mainstream comics industry.
Yes.
Yeah, change is very significant. And going a little bit off the topic of the industry, is there anything that you are working on right now that you'd like to tell our audience about?
Well, my latest book, which is a history of the women who drew comics during the Jazz Age, my latest book is The Flapper Queens. Hold on a minute, I'm going to get a copy to show you.
Oh, okay. In the sneak preview.
Here it is, The Flapper Queens. Everything's backwards, so it's hard for me to know how to hold this so it'll show. There, that way.
Well.
I just have to move it the opposite. This is a gorgeous book. Let me open it to some really nice art. These are women who drew comics during the Jazz Age, meaning the 20s and early 30s.
Wow.
It's a beautiful book, if I do say so myself. I'm terribly proud of it.
Dang, I'm really looking forward to
You
that.
should be able to find it in comic book stores that are open. You should be able to find it even in bookstores that are open. And if they don't have it, you have to ask them to carry it. And of course, it's available through Amazon and also through the publisher's website. They are Fantagraphics. It's available through their website.
All right, we'll see if we can get some links to that into the description of this video so that people can find it a bit easier. But that sounds very interesting. Like a lot of creative arts came out of the jazz era, and personally, it's one of my favorite eras of history. So
Yes, me too.
that sounds very interesting. So I also read that in the late 1960s, you had run a clothing boutique in the East Village. So
I did.
how did that come about?
Well, I've been sewing. I've been living in Los Angeles and sewing, making clothes for rock stars, really, and perfectly ordinary people too, and sometimes the girlfriends and wives of rock stars. And I came to New York in 1966. And the first thing I noticed, the Lower East Side was where everything was happening. And the first thing I noticed was the clothes. The boutiques had clothes that I thought were very boring, were not as adventurous or creative as the stuff that was going on in LA. So I rented a store. I believe it was like $45 a month in those days, and got all my stuff from New York, from Los Angeles. Went down to LA, loaded up my sewing machine and a bunch of fabric, and came back and just opened a boutique.
Oh. You make it sound so simple.
It was easy in those days. These days, it's much more complicated. There's so much red tape you have to go through if you want to open a store in San Francisco that you have to start with an enormous amount of money because it's going to be months, if not a year, before you can open a place. But in those days, it was very simple.
All that inflation. So what kinds of interesting people did you make clothes for in New York? Like rock stars and...
I made clothes for everyone. I did make clothes for rock stars. I made clothes for Jim Morrison's girlfriend, a pair of red velvet bell bottoms. Okay, well, people would just come in. I had great windows, really intriguing windows, and people would just come in. Sometimes they would just come in to get out of the rain, and they'd look around and they'd be interested. And it got to the point where it really did become a social scene. I closed at 8, but sometimes young hippie women would come in, beautiful young hippie women, and it would be 8, but I wouldn't close because they were looking at stuff. And handsome young hippie men would come in because the beautiful young hippie women were there, and everyone would just hang out. It was fun. It was really fun.
Yeah. Do you still make clothes for people today?
I make clothes for myself.
Oh, all right. Well, at least you can still enjoy your work.
I love sewing. It's restful. I love it. I don't quite love it as much as I love writing because writing just flows. Writing is so easy. Sewing takes a little more patience and attention.
Are there any clothing projects you're working on right now?
I just finished. I suddenly really got into house dresses, the little cotton frocks that women would wear during the Depression and during World War II. They would wear these little cotton washable dresses to do their housework in. And they were really sweet little things. So I decided I would like to make some house dresses. So I've just finished the 3rd one. And that's it. How many house dresses does a person need? And I'm about to start. I found a lovely pattern from the 50s for a teenager. I happen to have a 14-year-old granddaughter, and I think my next project is going to be making that 1950s dress for her.
All right. So is there anyone currently either in the comics industry or beyond that is doing creative work that you find inspirational?
I have to say I can't say all because there are so many now. I really can't keep up with them. But I would say all the graphic novels I read recently have been wonderful. I mean, actually, I'm really glad I don't draw anymore because I could not compete with these young women who are so talented. Luckily, I know I'm a good writer.
And I've seen your work with illustration, and it's really good styling. Like, I must
Thank
say,
you.
oh my gosh. What's the last graphic novel you've read? Like recently?
Oh gosh. Oh, a charming. A lot of the stuff I read is for YA, younger readers. And you know what's so nice is that it's easy and enjoyable for any age. You know, they call it all ages, and it is all ages. And shortly before the entire everything closed down, I read a lovely book by Amy Chu about mermaids. I cannot remember the name, and it would take me too long to go to the shelf where all the books are kind of jumbled together and find out. But think of the name Amy Chu and think of mermaids, and you could probably find it.
All right. We'll see if we can pull up a graphic later, or maybe flash it up on the screen for a bit. But yeah, I can definitely appreciate YA illustrators and authors, because like I interviewed Art Baltazar a little while back, and he does plenty of work like that. So I can always appreciate that.
Didn't he draw the Tiny Titans?
Yes, he did.
Or was it writing the Tiny Titans? Which was it?
Both, actually. I love that series. So, changing gears a little bit, you've been active in the civil rights and feminist movements for quite some time now. So, how does the atmosphere and execution of these movements in the past compare to what's going on now in 2020?
Well, we have so much to protest. You know, I mean, these are really tough times and will remain tough times unless we really have a good outcome in the election. I wouldn't know where to start. There's the Black Lives Matter movement. And, you know, I have to say I feel so naive because I really, you know, starting with the death of George Floyd, and then all these, you know, I mean, in the old days, cops didn't have body cameras and people didn't have smartphones that could film what was going on. So we really didn't know. Black people knew. They knew it because they lived it. But I didn't know. I feel very naive. And it's shocking. It's incredibly shocking to see what the cops think they can get away with. Is amazing and really also incredibly stupid because they know they're wearing body cameras. They know people are filming it and they still shoot these guys. You know, to me, this is uncanny and mind-boggling. So that's one thing I can think of, you know. And there's all the dangers. I mean, Amy Comey, what's her last name? Barrett? Do you know?
Barrett.
Who has been nominated, Amy Comey Barrett, who's been nominated for the Supreme Court, is anti-choice, is anti-gay marriage. She's anti so many. It's horrible. I mean, she belongs to this, you know, I wouldn't call it Catholic really. I have friends who are Catholic. That's not Catholicism. That's some kind of weird, scary cult that she belongs to. And if she gets elected to the Supreme Court, there's going to be an awful lot to march for.
Yeah. So overall, would you say the atmosphere for today is like worse? Does it feel more violent? Is it more intense or more violent? Or is it now just being more well covered that now we're seeing it?
Well, one of the things is definitely that it's more well covered. I mean, you know, now, like I say, the cops have body cams, people have, you know, smartphones and can document everything that happens. So it's certainly more well covered. It's also more intense though, because we really are, you know, we're facing amazing threats. And that's why it's so important. It is so important for everyone who can vote to vote. I just got a letter telling me, yesterday I got it from the polls, telling me that I qualified as a poll worker. And I'm so glad that I can be a poll worker. So I want to do something. I want to help in some way. And that's a way to help. Just voting is a way to help.
Yeah, we had recently covered in one of our longer topics just the importance that everybody needs to vote in this upcoming election, especially
Yes.
especially with all the like uncertainty being brewed around the voting process. It's important that everybody still needs to get out there and vote as much as possible.
Yes. Yes.
It's like if you got a friend that is thinking about sitting this one out, just drag them to the polls because we need this. So, do you feel like the women's movement is still making progress? Is the women's rights movement making more progress today? And even as things are getting better, do you still feel that more progress needs to be made?
Of course, no more progress needs to be made, but they are making progress. And women, there was a period. It was during the 80s, really, a kind of a backlash against feminism, against the second wave feminists. All these younger women were saying, oh, I don't need to be a feminist anymore, or I'm not a feminist, but that was very common, the I'm not a feminist, but. And now women are so much more aware of the inequalities and it's wonderful, really, because I used to feel that I was a voice crying in the wilderness, and I'm not a voice crying in the wilderness anymore.
Yeah, it does seem like complacency would be the worst outcome to any progress that's coming up.
Yes.
As far as we've gone forward.
And we never really, you have to always be aware. I mean, one of the things about the Flapper Queens, here's that book again, their attitude, you can see it all throughout the book. Their attitude is very joyful because women had gotten the vote in 1920 and they felt, we've done it, we're equal. But of course, now we know, looking back, that they weren't equal at all, and we're still not really treated equally. But they didn't know, so there's a kind of joyful naivete in this book because the women really do feel that they've gotten where they wanted to be and everything's going to be great. And of course, it wasn't. It was a revolution. The 20s was an amazing revolution. The change was amazing, but they weren't there yet, and we're still not there.
Yeah. So what things do you feel are the biggest threats currently to female progress?
Amy Coney Barrett is the biggest threat right now, really. I mean, if we don't have autonomy over our own bodies, then we have no autonomy.
Yeah. So, going into the aggregates there, how are you feeling about the upcoming election? Are you hopeful that people will make the right choices for the country?
I am very optimistic. I think Joe Biden, I have great faith in him and in Kamala Harris. He's, sure, he's not Bernie Sanders and he's not Liz Warren, but he is an intelligent, caring man. He's a human being, and that's just to get an intelligent, caring human being in office is when we start to heal.
All right. I'm sorry, something that I keep noticing in the background there. Is that a kitten back there?
I didn't know my cat was showing. Hold on. Maybe your cat is showing. Where is that cat? Oh.
It doesn't matter which side of the interview you're on, the cat's always coming to the shot.
This is Spats, also known as Spatsy, also known as Spatsy McCatsy.
Aww. Yeah, we actually have to make sure that the cats are out of the room and out of the living room off to the side of where we're shooting all this, because otherwise we'll just hear at the door to the office here just Boom, with the cats outside, just like, let me in. It always happens during, at least during interviews. So, kind of on the lighter note, ending it there. Just final question: if you had like a magic wand or a monkey's paw or I don't know, the Infinity Gauntlet or something like that, that would allow you to change 2 things about the world, what would you change?
First, I have to say, watch out for those monkey paws.
Oh, I know. Devil's in the details on those.
Okay, 2 things. Well, I'd get us a new president immediately. And I guess I'd immediately find a vaccine against the coronavirus. You know, and after that, you know, we can go on from there. There's no limit.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're trying to ask, like, change 2 things about the world, because everybody can have a response to the question, like, oh, if you could change 1 thing, what would you do? Then they had to, like, oh, that's a tough one, what to choose. But 2 things, that gives you a little bit of strategy there. So, is there anything, like, if that sort of cosmic power was possible, is there anything that you'd want for yourself?
Well, you know, people say, I wish I could fly, you know, all that stuff. Wish I were impervious to bullets. I don't know. Don't worry about bullets. You know, I'm pretty unlikely to have to do bullets and bracelets or anything. And, you know, I'm fine with just walking into a plane and flying that way. Changing anything for myself? Well, I suppose I really would like to live forever, but that's about it.
Yeah. Like, you definitely gotta watch out if it was like a monkey's paw situation. Like, you live forever.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, I shouldn't have said it.
Like, oh no. Well, I think that's all the time we got. This is Trina Robbins, everybody. We'll be right back.
Oh, hey! Thank you very much for watching. We'd like to thank our guest Trina Robbins for being an astounding person to interview and an overall pioneer of badassery. Early voting is starting pretty much everywhere, so get off your ass and do your civic duty. But seriously, go vote like your life depends on it, because very well might. Anyways, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and as always, it is what it is.